I'll give you just one warning. Earth's two extremes are nothing like you think. One is an ocean trapped in ice. The other, a frozen continent built like a fortress. One is teeming with life. The other is almost completely silent. And the shocking contrast between them will rewrite everything you thought you knew about Earth's extremes. Get ready, because these 35 geography facts about the Arctic and the Antarctic will leave you stunned long before you reach the end. 35. The Arctic Ocean that isn't really an ocean. The Arctic is often imagined as a frozen continent, but it's actually something far stranger. An ocean almost completely surrounded by land. The Arctic Ocean is the smallest and shallowest ocean on Earth, with an average depth of just 1,205 meters, less than half the depth of the Atlantic. Massive continental shelves stretch far into the basin, meaning huge areas of the Arctic are relatively shallow seas rather than deep ocean. This is one of the reasons Arctic sea ice forms so easily and extensively each winter. Cold temperatures plus shallow waters create perfect conditions for ice to grow fast and thick. What makes this even more unusual is how dynamic the Arctic Ocean is. Unlike Antarctica, which sits isolated by the Southern Ocean, the Arctic is connected to the Atlantic and Pacific through narrow gateways like the Bering Strait and the Greenland Sea. This allows warmer water to creep in, destabilizing ice from below. The Arctic isn't just melting from the top down, it's being eaten away from underneath. It's less a frozen desert and more a fragile, semi-enclosed sea, constantly fighting the surrounding continents and incoming heat. 34. Antarctica, the coldest place in the universe. Antarctica doesn't just hold Earth's cold records, it dominates them. In 2010, satellite data confirmed surface temperatures in East Antarctica dropped to minus 128.6 degrees Fahrenheit, the coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth. That's cold enough for exposed skin to freeze in seconds and for metal to become brittle. But what truly sets Antarctica apart is why it gets so cold. It's not just the latitude, it's the elevation, isolation, and ice. Antarctica is the highest continent on Earth, with an average elevation of over 7,500 feet. Thick ice sheets reflect sunlight, while the dry atmosphere traps almost no heat. The continent also generates its own weather, including katabatic winds, dense, cold air flowing downhill at hurricane speeds. These winds drain heat from the surface relentlessly. While the Arctic can sometimes feel almost mild during summer, Antarctica exists in a completely different thermal universe, closer to Mars than anywhere else humans regularly visit. Before continuing, be sure to subscribe and leave a like to keep discovering the strange and incredible geography of our entire world. 33. The Arctic's invisible borders. Unlike Antarctica, the Arctic doesn't belong to anyone and everyone at the same time. There is no Arctic continent, no single landmass to claim. Instead, the Arctic is divided among 8 nations: the United States, Canada, Russia, Norway, Denmark, via Greenland, Iceland, Sweden, and Finland. The borders aren't drawn on land, but through ice, water, and submerged continental shelves. This has triggered one of the most complex geopolitical chess games on Earth. Countries are racing to map the ocean floor to extend their territorial claims under international law, hoping to secure future access to oil, gas, rare minerals, and shipping routes. Russia has even planted a titanium flag on the seabed beneath the North Pole. As ice retreats, the Arctic is transforming from a frozen buffer into a contested economic frontier, where geography and politics are colliding in slow motion. 32. Antarctica has no time zones except all of them. Antarctica is the only place on Earth where time completely breaks down. Technically, all time zones converge at the South Pole, meaning every time zone exists at once. Since the continent has no permanent residents or government, there's no official timekeeping system. Instead, research stations operate on the time zone of their home country or supply route. This leads to surreal situations where neighboring stations are hours apart in local time, despite being only miles away. At the South Pole Station, scientists use New Zealand time, because that's where their flights come from. During summer, the sun never sets. During winter, it never rises. Time loses its meaning when days don't exist in any normal sense. Antarctica isn't just physically extreme, it completely breaks the human concept of time itself. 31. The Arctic is warming faster than anywhere else on Earth. The Arctic is heating up at more than 4 times the global average, a phenomenon known as Arctic amplification. The reason is brutally simple. Ice reflects sunlight, water absorbs it. As sea ice melts, darker ocean water is exposed, soaking up heat and accelerating the melt even further. This feedback loop has turned the Arctic into the fastest changing region on the planet. This warming doesn't stay in the Arctic. It destabilizes the jet stream, contributing to extreme weather across North America, Europe, and Asia. Heat waves, polar vortex collapses, and stalled weather systems are increasingly linked to Arctic warming. What happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. It rewires the planet's atmospheric engine. Yes. 30. Antarctica holds enough ice to drown the world. Antarctica contains about 90% of Earth's ice and 70% of its fresh water. If the Antarctic ice sheet were to melt completely, global sea levels would rise by roughly 190 feet. That's enough to erase every coastal city on Earth and redraw the continents entirely. But the real danger isn't total collapse. It's partial, uneven melting. West Antarctica is especially unstable. Much of its ice rests on bedrock below sea level, making it vulnerable to warm ocean currents. Scientists have identified glaciers like Thwaites, often called the Doomsday Glacier, as potential tipping points. Antarctica may look frozen and permanent, but beneath the surface, massive ice systems are already shifting in ways that could lock in centuries of sea level rise. 29. The Arctic has indigenous cultures older than history. Humans have lived in the Arctic for thousands of years. Indigenous groups like the Inuit, Sami, Nenets, and Chukchi developed ways of surviving in conditions most civilizations would find uninhabitable. They built technologies perfectly tuned to ice, darkness, and freezing, kayaks, sleds, layered clothing, and hunting strategies refined over generations. These cultures are deeply tied to the geography of the Arctic. Sea ice isn't just frozen water, it's a hunting platform, a travel route, and a food source. As ice disappears, entire ways of life are being destabilized. The Arctic isn't an empty wilderness. It's a human landscape shaped by knowledge that predates modern science. 28. Antarctica is the world's largest desert, and despite being covered in ice, Antarctica is technically a desert, the largest on Earth. It receives less than 2 inches of precipitation per year in its interior, less than the Sahara. Most of the ice didn't come from heavy snowfall, but from tiny accumulations over millions of years, compressed into ice kilometers thick. This extreme dryness means Antarctica preserves secrets incredibly well. Meteorites, ancient ice cores, and even microbial life remain frozen in place for hundreds of thousands of years. The continent isn't just cold, it's a perfectly preserved archive of Earth's climate history, locked away in a frozen desert larger than the United States and Mexico combined. 27. The Arctic has no permanent ice. One of the most shocking truths about the Arctic is that none of its ice is permanent. Unlike Antarctica, which sits on land ice, Arctic sea ice floats on water. Every year it grows in winter and shrinks in summer. What's disappearing now isn't seasonal ice, but multi-year ice. Thick ancient ice that once survived decades of melt cycles. This older ice used to dominate the Arctic Ocean. Today, it's rapidly vanishing, replaced by thin, fragile ice that breaks apart easily. This makes the Arctic more dangerous for wildlife, less reflective, and far more vulnerable to sudden, catastrophic ice loss. The Arctic isn't collapsing slowly, it's losing its structural backbone. 26. Antarctica can be seen from space-changing color. Antarctica isn't just white. Satellite imagery has revealed massive seasonal changes in color caused by algal blooms growing on the surface of melting snow. These microscopic organisms, often called watermelon snow, tint the ice pink, red, or green. As they darken the surface, they reduce reflectivity, causing the ice to absorb more heat and melt faster. This creates a biological feedback loop where life accelerates ice loss. Antarctica, once thought biologically inert, is proving to be far more dynamic and alive than expected, even here. In the coldest place on Earth, biology and geography are interacting in ways that could influence the future stability of the entire continent. 25. The Arctic's rivers dump more fresh water than any ocean can handle. The Arctic Ocean receives more fresh water than any other ocean on Earth, despite being the smallest. Massive rivers like the Ob, Yenisei, Lena, and Mackenzie pour enormous volumes of meltwater and rainfall into the Arctic basin every year. Together, they deliver more than 10% of all global river discharge into a single ocean. This constant influx of fresh water forms a lighter surface layer that floats above saltier ocean water, disrupting circulation patterns that help regulate Earth's climate. This imbalance is dangerous. Ocean circulation systems like the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation rely on salty, dense water sinking in the North Atlantic. As Arctic freshwater spreads southward, it weakens this process. Scientists fear that continued Arctic melting could slow or destabilize global ocean currents, altering weather patterns across Europe and North America. The Arctic may look remote, but its rivers quietly influence the entire planet's climate engine. 24. Antarctica has mountains taller than the Alps buried under ice. Hidden beneath Antarctica's ice sheet lies a mountain range as vast and dramatic as the European Alps. The Gamburtsev Mountains, discovered in the 1950s using seismic surveys, stretch over 750 miles and reach heights of nearly 9,000 feet. Yet no human has ever seen them directly. They're completely buried under more than a mile of ice. What makes this range especially bizarre is that it shouldn't exist. Mountains of that size typically form at tectonic plate boundaries, yet Antarctica's interior is geologically stable. Scientists believe the Gamburtsevs are ancient relics, preserved by ice for hundreds of millions of years. The ice sheet didn't just cover them, it protected them from erosion, freezing an entire mountain system in time beneath the continent. 23. The Arctic's ice used to be a highway. For thousands of years, Arctic sea ice wasn't a barrier, it was infrastructure. Indigenous peoples used frozen oceans as seasonal highways, traveling across vast distances by sled, foot, and later snowmobile. Hunters followed migration routes over ice that connected islands, coastlines, and hunting grounds in ways open water never could. As that ice disappears, entire travel networks are collapsing. Routes that were once reliable for generations are now unpredictable or gone entirely. Communities are being forced to adapt not just culturally, but geographically as the land-sea boundary itself dissolves. The Arctic isn't losing ice, it's losing connectivity, reshaping how humans and animals move across the top of the world. 22. Antarctica creates its own wind system. Antarctica doesn't just experience extreme winds, it manufactures them. The continent's interior cools so intensely that air becomes incredibly dense, then flows downhill under gravity toward the coast. These katabatic winds can reach speeds over 200 miles per hour, making them some of the strongest sustained winds on Earth. These winds sculpt the landscape, blasting snow off ridges and exposing bare ice, called blue ice fields. They can ground aircraft, shred equipment, and turn routine tasks into life-threatening operations. Entire weather systems are shaped by Antarctica's ability to generate cold, heavy air and fling it outward. The continent behaves less like land and more like a massive atmospheric machine. 21. The Arctic is becoming an ocean shipping shortcut. As ice retreats, the Arctic is opening shipping routes that were once impossible. The northern sea route along Russia's coast can cut travel between Europe and Asia by up to 40% compared to the Suez Canal. What once required icebreakers is now navigable for months at a time by conventional ships. This shift has massive implications. Shorter routes mean lower fuel costs, faster delivery times, and increased geopolitical competition, but it also introduces risks. Oil spills in fragile ecosystems, increased black carbon pollution on ice, and militarization of Arctic waters. The Arctic is transforming from a frozen barrier into a global trade corridor, and it's happening far faster than most infrastructure or regulations can keep up with. 20. Antarctica has lakes that have never seen sunlight. Beneath Antarctica's ice sheet lie more than 400 subglacial lakes, sealed off from the surface for hundreds of thousands and in some cases millions of years. Lake Vostok, one of the largest, sits under nearly 2.5 miles of ice and is roughly the size of Lake Ontario. These lakes aren't frozen solid. Heat from Earth's interior and pressure from the ice keep them liquid. Scientists believe they may host microbial ecosystems that evolved in total darkness and isolation. Studying them offers clues about life's limits on Earth and possibly on icy moons like Europa or Enceladus. Antarctica isn't just a frozen desert, it's hiding entire aquatic worlds beneath its ice. 19. The Arctic has seasons of total darkness and endless sun. At the Arctic Circle and beyond, the sun breaks the rules. In summer, it never sets. In winter, it never rises. This extreme light cycle reshapes everything: biology, psychology, and even architecture. Plants grow rapidly during brief summers, animals time migrations with precision, and humans adapt with unique cultural rhythms. But as climate change alters snow cover and ice reflectivity, these light-driven systems are being disrupted. Earlier melts expose darker surfaces that absorb more heat, amplifying seasonal extremes. The Arctic's relationship with sunlight isn't just dramatic, it's a fundamental driver of its fragile balance. 18. Antarctica is technically a nuclear-free continent. Antarctica is the only continent on Earth legally protected from military activity and nuclear weapons. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959, designates the entire continent as a scientific preserve. No mining, no weapons testing, no territorial expansion by force. This makes Antarctica geopolitically unique. While nations operate research stations, all claims are frozen, literally and legally. Yet as resources elsewhere become scarcer, pressure is mounting. The ice may be protected on paper, but the future of Antarctica depends on whether global cooperation can survive long-term environmental stress. 17. The Arctic has permafrost that locks away ancient carbon. Beneath Arctic soil lies permafrost, ground that has remained frozen for thousands of years. Trapped inside it is an estimated 1.5 trillion tons of carbon, nearly twice as much as currently exists in the atmosphere. As permafrost thaws, microbes begin breaking down organic matter, releasing carbon dioxide and methane. This turns the Arctic into a climate wild card. Thawing permafrost doesn't just respond to warming, it accelerates it. Entire landscapes are collapsing into sinkholes and slumps as ice-rich ground melts. The Arctic isn't just warming, it's destabilizing from the ground up. 16. Antarctica is gaining ice in one place and losing it everywhere else. In East Antarctica, snowfall has slightly increased in some regions, thickening parts of the ice sheet, but this gain is dwarfed by massive losses along the coasts, especially in West Antarctica and the Antarctic Peninsula. Ice is flowing faster into the ocean than it's being replaced inland. This uneven behavior makes Antarctica incredibly difficult to predict. It's not a single system, it's dozens of interconnected ones reacting differently to warming air and water. While headlines often oversimplify, the reality is more unsettling. Antarctica is changing in complex ways that could lock in sea level rise long after emissions stop. 15. The Arctic once hosted forests and giant animals. The Arctic hasn't always been a frozen world. Millions of years ago, it supported dense forests filled with towering trees, wetlands, and a surprisingly rich ecosystem. Fossil evidence from places like Ellesmere Island in Canada shows preserved remains of redwoods, cypress trees, and swamp forests thriving near the North Pole. At the time, the region experienced long periods of darkness and light just like today, but global temperatures were warm enough to prevent permanent ice from forming. These ancient Arctic forests supported massive animals, including ancestors of camels, horses, and giant mammals adapted to extreme seasonal light cycles rather than cold. This completely rewrites the image of the Arctic as eternally frozen. Ice is not its default state, it's a relatively recent phase in geological terms. The Arctic has flipped between warm and cold worlds before, and its fossils serve as a warning that the planet's climate can transform entire regions far faster than human civilizations expect. 14. Antarctica is slowly rebounding as ice disappears. As Antarctica loses ice, the land beneath it is literally rising. This process, known as isostatic rebound, occurs because the immense weight of ice, sometimes more than 2 miles thick, has been pressing the crust downward for millions of years. As ice melts and flows into the ocean, that pressure eases, and the continent begins to lift upward, sometimes at rates of several centimeters per year. This rebound has complex consequences. Rising land can slightly slow local sea level rise, but it can also destabilize nearby glaciers by altering their slopes and flow patterns. Antarctica isn't just melting, it's physically reshaping itself in response. The ground is moving, the ice is shifting, and the entire continent is adjusting to a new balance it hasn't experienced in millions of years. 13. The Arctic is triggering chain reactions across the planet. Changes in the Arctic don't stay in the Arctic. As sea ice shrinks, the temperature difference between the poles and the equator weakens. This disrupts the jet stream, causing it to wobble, slow down, and sometimes stall entirely. When that happens, weather patterns get stuck in place, leading to prolonged heat waves, floods, cold snaps, and droughts across the northern hemisphere. These cascading effects mean Arctic warming is directly linked to extreme weather in places thousands of miles away. A heat dome over Europe, a deep freeze in Texas, or catastrophic flooding in Asia can all trace part of their origin back to a destabilized Arctic atmosphere. The Arctic acts like a control knob for global climate. Turn it too far, and the entire system behaves unpredictably. 12. Antarctica is one of the best places to find meteorites on Earth. Despite its remoteness, Antarctica is the world's richest hunting ground for meteorites. More than 2/3 of all known meteorites have been recovered there. The reason is simple geography. Dark space rocks stand out sharply against the white ice, and the slow movement of glaciers naturally concentrates meteorites in specific areas called ice traps. As ice flows uphill over buried ridges and then sublimates in fierce winds, meteorites that fell tens of thousands of years ago are left behind on the surface. Some of these rocks predate Earth itself, offering clues about the formation of the solar system. Antarctica isn't just preserving Earth's climate history, it's quietly collecting fragments of deep space on its frozen surface. 11. The Arctic could see ice-free summers within decades. One of the most shocking projections in climate science is that the Arctic Ocean could experience nearly ice-free summers within the next few decades. This doesn't mean all ice disappears year-round, but that during late summer, vast stretches of open water may replace what was once a solid ice cap. Satellite records already show a dramatic decline in summer sea ice extent since the late 1970s. An ice-free Arctic would radically alter ecosystems, weather systems, and global shipping routes. It would absorb far more solar energy, accelerating warming even further. Species that rely on sea ice, like polar bears, seals, and walrus, would lose critical habitat. The Arctic is approaching a threshold that humanity has never witnessed before, and once crossed, it may be impossible to reverse within any meaningful time frame. Remember to subscribe and like to keep learning amazing facts about every part of our incredible world. 10. The Arctic is revealing landscapes humans have never seen before. As Arctic ice retreats, it's not just water that's being exposed, it's entire landscapes that have been hidden since before modern humans existed. Retreating glaciers are uncovering ancient valleys, coastlines, river systems, and soil surfaces that haven't seen daylight in tens of thousands of years. In places like Greenland, Alaska, and Siberia, newly exposed land is appearing so fast that maps struggle to keep up. What makes this extraordinary is that these landscapes are often biologically and chemically active the moment they're exposed. Ancient plant material begins decomposing, releasing greenhouse gases. Rivers carve new paths through freshly revealed sediment. Archaeologists have discovered preserved animal remains, tools, and even traces of human activity emerging from melting ice. The Arctic isn't just changing, it's being rewritten, revealing a world that vanished long before recorded history and forcing modern ecosystems to adapt to terrain that effectively belongs to another era. 9. Antarctica has ice older than human civilization. Some Antarctic ice is more than 1.5 million years old, making it the oldest intact ice on Earth. Layer by layer, snowfall compacted into ice has trapped tiny bubbles of ancient air, literal samples of past atmospheres. By drilling ice cores, scientists can read Earth's climate history like pages in a book, tracking carbon dioxide levels, volcanic eruptions, temperature swings, and even dust storms from continents thousands of miles away. This makes Antarctica one of the most important scientific archives on the planet. It tells us how Earth behaves when CO2 rises, how fast ice can collapse, and how climate systems respond to stress. Antarctica doesn't just show us where we're going, it shows us where we've been, and how dramatically the planet can change when certain thresholds are crossed. In a very real sense, Antarctica remembers worlds that no longer exist. 8. The Arctic is reshaping coastlines in real time. Arctic coastlines are eroding faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. In places like northern Alaska and Siberia, entire sections of coastline are collapsing into the sea at rates of several meters per year. The reason is permafrost. Much of the Arctic coast is made of frozen soil cemented together by ice. As that ice melts, the land loses its structural integrity and simply falls apart. Villages, cemeteries, fuel tanks, and roads are being swallowed by the ocean. Some communities have already voted to relocate entirely, becoming some of the world's first climate refugees. Unlike sandy beaches that shift gradually, Arctic erosion can be sudden and catastrophic. A single storm can erase decades of stability. The Arctic isn't slowly shrinking, it's crumbling at the edges. 7. Antarctica controls global sea level more than any other place. If Greenland melted completely, global sea levels would rise about 23 feet. If Antarctica melted, it would be nearly 8 times that amount, but even partial melting has outsized consequences. Antarctic ice sheets interact directly with the ocean, meaning warm water can melt them from below, even when air temperatures remain frigid. Floating ice shelves act like corks, slowing the flow of inland glaciers. When those shelves collapse, as seen dramatically on the Antarctic Peninsula, glaciers behind them accelerate toward the sea. This process can become irreversible. Antarctica isn't just ice sitting still, it's a dynamic system capable of locking in sea level rise for centuries. What happens here determines the fate of coastlines worldwide. 6. The Arctic has wildlife found nowhere else on Earth. The Arctic isn't biologically empty, it's hyper-specialized. Animals here are adapted to extreme cold, seasonal darkness, and scarce food in ways seen nowhere else. Polar bears depend on sea ice as hunting platforms. Arctic foxes change fur color with the seasons. Narwhals use tusks packed with nerve endings to sense their environment beneath the ice. But these adaptations are becoming liabilities. As ice disappears and seasons shift, species finely tuned to the Arctic's old rhythm struggle to adjust. New competitors move north, food webs destabilize. The Arctic's wildlife isn't just threatened, it's being forced to evolve or disappear at unprecedented speed. This is one of the fastest ecological experiments ever forced upon nature. 5. Antarctica has entire ecosystems living inside the ice. Antarctica's ice isn't sterile. Deep within glaciers and ice sheets, scientists have discovered microbial ecosystems living in microscopic pockets of liquid water between ice crystals. These organisms survive without sunlight, feeding on minerals and chemical energy in a process similar to ecosystems found near deep-sea hydrothermal vents. These discoveries redefine where life can exist. If organisms can survive inside Antarctic ice for hundreds of thousands of years, it strengthens the case for life on icy worlds like Mars or Jupiter's moon Europa. Antarctica isn't just a frozen wasteland, it's a testing ground for the limits of life itself. 4. The Arctic is opening a new chapter in global power politics. As ice retreats, the Arctic is becoming one of the most strategically important regions on Earth. Nations are racing to secure shipping lanes, military positions, and resource claims. Oil, gas, rare earth elements, and fisheries are suddenly accessible in ways that were impossible just decades ago. Military activity is increasing, ports are expanding, icebreakers are being built at record pace. The Arctic is shifting from a frozen buffer zone into a geopolitical hotspot. Geography is destiny here, and as the physical landscape changes, so does the balance of power. The Arctic's future won't just be shaped by climate, it will be shaped by human ambition. 3. Antarctica is the only continent humans cannot permanently settle. Despite decades of exploration, no human population has ever permanently settled Antarctica. There are no cities, no native inhabitants, no agriculture, and no self-sustaining communities. Every human presence depends entirely on supply chains from other continents. This makes Antarctica unique in human history. It's the only place where geography has completely resisted colonization. Even the Arctic, harsh as it is, has supported cultures for millennia. Antarctica remains fundamentally hostile to long-term human habitation. It stands as a reminder that there are still parts of Earth that cannot be conquered, only visited. 2. The Arctic is approaching climate tipping points. Scientists fear we can't reverse. Some Arctic changes may already be locked in. Loss of multi-year ice, widespread permafrost thaw, and altered ocean circulation could continue even if global emissions stop tomorrow. These tipping points don't announce themselves loudly. They unfold quietly, then accelerate beyond control. Once crossed, they commit the planet to long-term change. The Arctic isn't just responding to warming, it's amplifying it. Scientists warn that we may be watching the early stages of transformations that will define Earth's climate for centuries. The Arctic is no longer a warning sign, it's an active force reshaping the planet. 1. Antarctica and the Arctic are nothing alike, and that's why they matter so much. At a glance, the Arctic and Antarctica seem like mirror images. Vast ice, endless cold, white horizons, but geographically, climatically, and biologically, they couldn't be more different. The Arctic is an ocean surrounded by land, shaped by human cultures and seasonal ice. Antarctica is a continent surrounded by ocean, isolated, elevated, and locked in deep time. These differences control how ice melts, how ecosystems function, and how the planet responds to change. Confusing the two leads to dangerous oversimplifications. Understanding their contrasts reveals how Earth systems actually work. The poles aren't interchangeable. Together, they form the bookends of the planet's climate system, and the story they're telling right now is one humanity cannot afford to ignore. After learning these 35 geographic facts about the Arctic and the Antarctic, tell us, which one did you like best, or which one surprised you? Leave your answers in the comments, and let's see how many of us chose the same fact. And speaking of choosing, the best thing you can do is watch the video below. That way you'll become a true geography expert. But before you go, don't forget to subscribe and like, so we can keep learning together. See you in the video.